He served in the U.S. Army during World War II as a private first class in the European theater. Mr. Casey, when were you drafted, or when did you enlist?
I was drafted in 1941.
Where were you living at the time?
I was living in Hartford
With your family?
with my family, yes.
And when you were drafted by the Army. Did you recall your first few days in service?
It was really upsetting because I got confused. There was so much going on, but it worked out fine.
What did it feel like to be drafted?
Well, it felt like I was needed, and I'm glad I went to serve my country, because there's not a better one in all the world.
What can you tell us about your training? Where did you do your training?
I did my training at Columbia, South Carolina, Fort Jackson, 100th Infantry Division. I had a sergeant by the name of Sergeant Harper, and he was a tall, blonde, rugged man, and he was tough. And the purpose of being tough is to make us tough. That's what I can say for him. I was glad that he had me for a student.
Tell us about a typical day of your boot camp experience.
My boot camp, well, we used to trade up and down a lot and use the rifle. And walk. We had long walks. And one thing I won't eat today is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. We used to have them when we were out on a trip, on a field experience, say 10 miles or 15 miles. And we all did it within the same day.
What other types of activities did you do during training?
I really don't know what to say. Such as what?
Did you receive any specialized training?
Yes. In my training, I was a 60mm mortarman. It's a tube that has, what do they call them? A stand. And I put in the shell during the war. While training, they gave us these dummy shells. They weren't real. They didn't work. But to give us the exercise, they put the shell in the tube. And it traveled about 200 yards, 150 yards. It was close combat. I was in dangerous quarters. I was open all the time.
What other experience do you remember from training? Do you remember any of your friends, or the food, or the lodging? Anything in particular you remember?
Well, the lodging was quite crowded. We had up and down beds. Climb up we had so many troops in the company that we had they had a bed on the lower side, they had a bed up on top. I was on the lower side. I was lucky to climb up those beds every day.
I don't suppose you had much free time during those boot camp training time, but when you did have a little bit of free time, what type of activities would you engage in?
Well, we used to go into town and have a beer. I was drinking then. I don't drink anymore. And we used to go to the tavern. But one thing that gets me, it was the time of segregation, if you don't mind me talking about it. And it got me damn mad because I'm from the north, and they were from the south. They hated the Negroes. They used them for dirt. And at that time, they used to have the Ku Klux Klan. You may have heard of it. They were vicious people. They had hoods. You couldn't see their face. They were such cowards. And they burnt a man alive, a Negro alive. They stripped him and they ran you know the truck that Johnny had. Well, they sat in the back of the truck with a long chain tied to the black man, and they'd run him up and down the road. They'd beat him, you know. There were some white people like myself that were killed too. That's what caused the trouble with the Ku Klux Klan. These white people were the ones that tried to help the black man, and they were killed.
Did these experiences occur while you were in training camp?
Huh?
Did these experiences occur while you were in boot camp?
Yes.
What other experiences do you remember from your training? Was there any particular task or assignment that was most difficult of all that you remember?
Well, the most difficult of all was the time it was raining. And there was a lot of mud on the ground, and we had to crawl on the ground with our rifles up to our chest for the experience of the enemy not seeing us. And I got all soggy, muddy, and all the other cleaned up. It was a damn mess.
How did you get through it? How did you survive such a difficult training ordeal?
I'm like any other person. I wanted to live a little longer.
Now, you served during World War II. Where exactly did you go from training?
Training.
In other words, how did you get to Europe?
Oh. Well, we were called up. We went by boat to Europe. The name of the ship was the General Geo Squire. I'll always remember that because that seems to ring in my mind. And it was a large ship, and there were a lot of ships in the service at the time. There were as many as 1,500 ships all going over to Europe. And the airplanes filled the sky with them. And it took us 15 days to, would you believe it, to get to Italy. That was our total destination. And by being so many in the harbor, I had to wait one day in the harbor before I could get off the boat. We had to climb over wreckage of some of the boats that were destroyed in the harbor, climb over them, and then get on the box, get on the freight car. I called them 40 soldiers, 8 horses like from the First World War. And we took them, we went, incidentally, my brother Charlie was in Naples at the same time, but I couldn't see him because I was being rushed to my destination for indoctrination and all. And I missed him. I never seen him until after the war.
On such a crowded boat during those 15 days, what did you do?
Oh, there was a lot of gambling. Cards and dice. And some people made a lot of money, so what good was it, because we couldn't spend it where we were going.
Now, where did the ship exactly arrive? Did you go straight to Italy? The ship that brought you to Europe, did it take you directly to Italy?
Oh, directly to Italy, yeah.
Do you remember the name of the city that you landed in?
Naples.
Naples. Okay. What was it?
That was at the border of the country, Naples.
Yes. And what was it like when you landed there?
It was terrible. People didn't have any food to eat, and they they'd do anything, even offer the women even offered themselves. You know what I mean? I don't want to say it on the thing.
And what was your first job assignment when you arrived there in Italy? At that point, were you assigned to a particular division?
Yes. That's when I got to get into the 1st Armored Division.
Okay. So you were assigned to the 1st Armored Division.
I was in the division stateside. They transferred me to the 1st Armored Division. And before I go any further, when I left the 100th Infantry Division, you don't mind me telling you, the day I left the 100th Infantry Division to go to the 1st Armored, with the parade and review, which took a couple hours, a division, a whole infantry division is equal to about 12 to 15,000 soldiers. And it took 2 to 3 hours in a reviewing stand. It was a long time, but a wonderful time.
So then when you were in Italy, you were assigned to the 1st Armored Division, the 6th Infantry Battalion. Is that correct?
Company A.
Company A. Okay. So from Naples, where did you go?
I have to think, this is a tough one.
Did you go directly into combat, or perhaps you went for some additional training?
We went up to Pisa, P-I-S-A, the leaning tower of Pisa. I got up there. We traveled by truck. We got up there, and it was really good evening. As a matter of fact, to get up, there were stone steps to get up to the leaning tower, at the top of the leaning tower. There were stone steps. There were over 200 of them. I counted every one. And they were very old because they were used so much. And I scribbled my name on the top of the piece, the leaning tower.
And from Pisa, where did you go?
I think I went into combat. There was a place, gee, I don't know. It was a tough place. I can't remember the name.
Do you remember where you saw your first combat?
The first combat that happened when we were at Mount Marici. It's a large mountain, about 7,000 feet up in the air, and we had a fight to get up there. We didn't just walk up. It was the toughest part of my life. And while up there, no, after that, when we get up there, before we got up there, it had rained a lot, you know, and there was a pool of water that first settled. And while going up there, they were shelling us. And I fell to the ground because I got hit with shrapnel. I didn't know it was shrapnel. I thought it was a big rock that broke my arm. But it was a piece of shrapnel from a Mark 6 Tiger tank. They were firing on us. And you know, a lot of people thought I'd feel bad. I felt real good because I knew that once I got out of there, that I'd have a decent meal, a bed to sleep in, and the food to eat. And one thing I'll say about the Navy and the Air Corps, they had tough fighting, which we all did. That's the purpose of why we went there. But they ate good, they slept good. I ate a lot of my food out of a foxhole, K-ration.
So, what time of year was this in which you were injured?
Oh, this was in the winter.
Do you remember what month it was that you got injured in?
Oh, it was in the fall, September, because October 10th, no, it was September 26th.
Okay, so during the fall of 1944, that's when you were injured. And then where did they bring you to recover from your injuries?
They went to a hospital.
Do you remember what city the hospital was in?
Montebello or something. I don't know.
Do you remember much of that?
It's been so long.
Do you remember much of that experience?
Yeah, it was quite an experience because when I got hit, I thought I got hit with a rock. But like I mentioned, it was raining at the time. And just a little rain. And then there got to be a lot of rain. To get to one place to another, I had to wade through the water. It was up to my chest. And I'm not even a good swimmer. And I went to the hospital. The city of Leghorn comes to me. I don't know what I ever mentioned to you.
Was it a large hospital that you were in?
Huh?
Was it a large hospital that you were in?
No. It was an army hospital. And then they gave me morphine. They doped me up. The next thing I knew, I had my arm all wrapped up in a sling, but I was soaking wet. And anyway, I told them before I was operated on, I asked the doctor to save the piece of shrapnel for me, that I wanted to keep it for a souvenir from the Second World War. I got it the hard way. I had the shrapnel for some time, and when I come home, my mother threw the damn thing out. It broke my heart. My mother was all, she wasn't the mother that everybody would like to have. She thought of spending money and having a good time. And when she met me at the railroad station when I come home, she asked me, why did I come home? How do you feel after all these years to have your mother tell you that my daughter, no, she wasn't born.
Now, back in the hospital, did you recover quickly from your wound?
No, it took some time. My arm was in this thing. It's a good thing it was my right arm because I'm left-handed. If it was a left hand, I had to write with my right hand and start over.
Do you remember how long you were in the hospital?
Well, I was away from combat for 3 months. I spent a lot of time in the hospital.
Did you rejoin your same company, Company A,
Oh,
when you
yes,
recovered?
I went back to Company A.
And where were they when you rejoined them?
They're back in reserve. They're off the line. And during Christmas and the holidays, they were fighting up on the line. They didn't have a holiday. It was really tough.
So then when you returned to action, you were in your company was in reserves for a while, and then you went back to battle where?
Lugano.
Can you remember some of your experiences there?
It was at Monterey where I got wounded. And you could see miles away. It was way up. I might be wrong. It's been so many years, but I think it was about 7,000 feet above the sea level. Winston Churchill said of all fighting in Europe and different places and all, Italy was the worst because we had to climb thousands of feet up in the air to get to the enemy and fight them.
So you did a lot of your fighting in the mountains, and so the weather must have been a big part of.
Oh, it was snow and rain. Like I told you, it was mud, rain, and mules. Mules saved my life. That's the one thing I didn't even put in my diary, and I'm kicking myself for it. They were firing a machine gun down towards my way, and there was a dead mule lying on the ground. I ducked in the back of it, and the bullets went into the mule's stomach. And that mule saved my life, and I never put it in my diary, and I could kick myself.
Now, during some of that time, you must have spent a lot of time in foxholes.
Oh, yes.
What was it like trying to dig a foxhole in the cold weather in the mountains?
Oh, it was treacherous. We had a small shovel. Sometimes we dug with our hands or whatever we could do. The quicker we did it, the safer we were. It was really hard.
Now, up in the mountains, were you above the tree line, or were you in forested areas? Can you kind of describe the type of area you were in?
It was all trees and bushes around.
So it was heavily forested.
Yeah.
So was it difficult to see your enemy?
Oh, yeah. They were way away. The 10th Mountain Division come in around toward the end of the war. Bob Joel, remember him? You and I went up to see him. Well, they come in around March and February, and March or April, toward the end of the war. Also, they had the 370th Infantry, the black soldiers, and they were good fighters.
Did you fight alongside them?
Yes, I fought alongside them.
In your company, were there many other casualties?
Oh, yes. Some of my best friends got killed.
Are there any particular battles or days during that time that you remember in particular?
That, in my book, the first time in the video, maybe you can tell you something. You had the book.
Yes. Now, the area that you were in, I think that's known as the Po Valley. Is that correct?
The Po Valley.
Okay.
You took a picture of me in the Po Valley. Remember that?
At the World War II monument. Yes.
Doug, you made my life so happy. There's not enough words to thank you. We had a good time there. I loved to be in Washington.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you remember any of your other experiences during that time? While you were in the Po Valley? Do you remember any other experiences?
Oh, I remember. No, there's not much I can remember. Well, one thing I did remember, when we got to the Po Valley, we linked up with the 10th Mountain Infantry Division with Bob Joel, and I didn't know him at the time, but his division come in late in the war. And then when we went to Washington to see him, that's when I seen him in person. He was a great man. I don't know if he's still living or not.
Tell me about, at what point did you realize that the Allies were going to win the war?
One thing, they kept coming in closer. One thing you didn't ask me about, Mussolini and his woman, Clara Bartazzi, they were hung upside down. He didn't know nothing. He took everything from Hitler. Hitler told him what to do and he did it. It's a shame because them people suffered so much. Little children didn't have food, they didn't have clothes. When we went over there, we fed them and we took pictures with them and we played with them and all in our spare time. And try to bring back memories for them. They suffered a lot in Italy.
Tell me about the last couple of weeks of the war.
The last couple of weeks of the war was real dangerous because if you've seen the movie Battle of the Bulge, we were surrounded by the enemy, by the Germans. They had us locked in. And it was foggy for 2 or 3 days, and then we had thousands of planes, but we couldn't use them at the time because of the fog. They couldn't see where we were going. On the third day, General Patton's division come up to help us. And the planes, the sky opened up. It was the most beautiful thing I ever seen in my life. The sky opened up, it was clear all the way, and hundreds of planes were in the sky. And they went and they bombed the hell out of the Germans. That's the end of the war.
How did you learn the news that the Germans had surrendered?
Huh?
How did you learn the news that the Germans had surrendered?
Oh, we had a general that told us about it. One of the generals from one of the divisions. They had a lot of divisions there. But you may think that we were celebrating the same day. We were so damn tired, exhausted, and hurt and shot up and all that all we wanted to do was sleep for a while. We lay down on the ground and we fell asleep. But the next day, we raised hell. I mean, because we deserved it. We fought hard. Didn't get no thanks, but we did all right. We celebrated by drinking wine, and the wine was real good. And one thing that surprised me, we seen the women did a lot of the work. The men would sit around, didn't do nothing. There was a woman that had to do all the work. I felt sorry for them. I see them crushing grapes with their feet to make wine, you know.
Now, did you form very many strong friendships during the war?
Oh, I had a lot of friends, but most of them were buried over in Italy. I had the book. The diary. It tells everything. Have you read the diary?
Yes. Yep.
What did you think of it?
Did any particular friends that you want to speak about?
Herman Ducote. He was my best friend. He come from the Bayou country, county, not country, Bayou country of Louisiana. That's back in the past. But him and I were the best of friends. And the 3 days before the war ended, we were riding on the top of the tanks, the tanks, and they started shelling us as we were pulling in a country road. And the driver pulled me down in the tank, and he jumped off and he ran in a certain way, and he got killed by a shell, artillery shell. I'll never forget it. That's where I wear the hat. Every day I wear the hat, I always think of him. There's never been a better friend that a man could have. It makes me so sad to know that he got killed and I got to live.
Were you awarded any medals or citations for your actions during the war?
Well, I got the combat badge that I had. You had to meet the enemy to get the combat badge. They talk about the Medal of Honor, all that, which is true. But you had to get that badge before you get any other medals.
You're talking about the combat infantryman badge.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on top in blue. And then I got the Bronze Star.
Why don't you point it to the camera? Dad, why don't you point that to the camera? Okay. And what else were you awarded?
I wore the Purple Heart.
For your injury?
There's the three battles, these three little stars here. These are the battles that I was in. This is a good conduct medal. I don't know what these two are. The Maureen did a beautiful job with it.
Can you describe a typical day during the war when you were not in battle, maybe when you were off the lines? I'd like to hear what a day like that was like.
The thing that I never told you, I never got a letter from home. I went through the whole war without a letter or a telegram.
None of your family stayed in contact with you?
No. My mother and my brother Jimmy was tuberculosis. He finally died, they all died. But he was my mother's boy. You know, they always have a cousin. I was I don't know what I was.
What was the food like during the Army, during your days in the Army?
Not the best. K ration. Once in a while, I think the time that I got to the hospital and they said it's good. And when I was in the hospital, it was good. And I remember Christmas time of 44 or 45. No, it wasn't 45.
Probably 44.
44, because 45 the war was over. Well, I was in the hospital. They fed us good. I had good meals and all. And then at midnight, they had this choir come singing Christmas carols. They were all black men. And they were the attendants in the hospital to take care of their needs and all. And they were singing Christmas carols. And it was so beautiful, I had tears streaming down my eyes. And they had this one person singing. He had a soprano voice, you know, a beautiful voice. Jesus, it made me cry. You know, it was so beautiful and they were so nice.
Did you have plenty of supplies?
Yes, we had plenty of supply.
Did you feel a lot of pressure or stress?
Oh, yes. You had to do your job. It was kill or be killed. You had to be on your toes all the time. You never knew when you were going to die or live.
And how did you deal with your stress? Was there any activity you could engage in that maybe provided you a little bit of temporary relief?
Not much. Not much.
What was sleeping like? Was it difficult to sleep?
Yes, because you never know who's going to jump in your foxhole. Like in the Japanese War, that's what they did. They go in and they be in the foxhole with the Americans.
Did you have any habits or practices that you would do to try to maybe help you or bring you a little bit of good luck? Did you have any rituals that you would perform for good luck? No?
No.
The
thing that gave me the biggest thrill when I was working in the steeple sorting mail for the servicemen. I went to Austria and different places and all. But I remember one time I was at this little town by a waterfall. Not a waterfall, it's a place where the water comes out.
like a water fountain.
Water fountain. And they asked me for my autograph. I started signing a couple of people there, but by the time I got through, I had about 50 people. The reason being that I was left-handed and not left-handed in Switzerland, but I had a fine time.
What did people do to entertain themselves when you were off the lines? Any downtime you had?
Mostly write letters and things like that.
Was there any other games or anything that people would play?
No, not that I remember.
While you were on active duty, did you ever have any leave?
Any what?
Any leave? Any time off? after the war was over, then, I know it was there must have been some time before you were able to go back home. What did you do during that period after the war before you came back to the States?
Well,
Did you stay in Italy or did you go anywhere else?
I stayed in Italy. I was put in a mail depot, sorted mail. That's how I finally got a job with the government in the post office. I spent 22 years, 22 years before my retirement. And I had 3 years from combat army duty. It gave me 25 years to retire. And I think the year was about 1987 or something. Long time ago.
So after the war, then you were in Italy. What part of Italy were you in before you came back to the States?
Yeah, again, I had to see my.
That's okay. Did you have any time off then at that time? Was it a little bit more relaxed than during the war, or were you working all the time?
I worked quite a bit.
During your service, do you remember any, either during boot camp or after the war, do you remember any humorous or unusual events? Did any of the soldiers play any pranks on anyone else? Anything in particular you remember?
No.
What did you think of your officers, your commanding officers?
I thought they were all right. They knew what they were doing. As a matter of fact, one of the officers just graduated from West Point, and they shipped him over to Italy. And we knew more about it than he did, but the purpose, he was there to learn it. He was a good person. I didn't know his name.
Do you feel that people were treated fairly in your company?
Yes. You know, I give Sergeant Harper credit. By being kind of tough, he toughened us up. And I have the greatest respect for him.
Now, did you write a personal diary of any of your events?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Mm.
Now, do you remember the day that your service ended? Do you recall that day? Not necessarily what the day was, but what your reaction was?
Oh, I was real tired, and I was quite pleased. What was it? It was September 26th.
How did you arrive back in the United States? How did you get back to the States?
I come back by boat
Leaving from where?
from Naples.
And where did it arrive?
They arrived in New York. And I think Maryland or somewhere around there, I don't know.
And were you allowed to go directly home? Did you go directly home from there?
I was in camp for a while, and then I went home.
And what did you
But
do?
I had nothing to go home to. I finally went and lived with my sister. She died, they all died. The only ones left is my brother Charlie and me. And he used to get me into more trouble all the time with my father. Oh, he was he's in rock Rocky Hill today. He has dementia. You know what dementia is. You don't know.
Yes.
And you shuffle on your feet. You don't walk. He's real bad. I expect to hear that he's passed away any day now. My wife is not in the best of health.
So now, when you got back home and you went to live with your sister, what did you do in those first few weeks back home?
Not much. I didn't have a job.
What did you do eventually? Did you go to school? Did you get a job?
I went to night high school later on. Spent 3 years at night high school to get my diploma, and that was real tough. I was working at Colts at the time in a mail room, and I worked the regular day. I'd come home, I'd have a little supper, and then I'd go to school. I'd go to the high school, or whatever it was, from 7 to 9 at night. And then that was the 3 years. And you gotta realize they gave me homework to do. I'd be up to midnight doing my homework. And then I'd get about 5 or 6 hours sleep and go back to work. That was my life at the beginning of at the end of the war.
What type of work did you do?
I worked in the mailroom sorting mail.
Well, I thought you said you worked at Colt first. Is that what you were doing there?
I worked in the mailroom at Colt.
At Colt.
As I first started. And then I had the opportunity to go to the post office. At that time you had to take a test. And you had a certain like 85 is all right to do. I used to study all the time. I wasn't around the college, but my mother was always asking for money, you know. I had a tough life.
Did you form any close friendships while you were in the service?
Oh yes, I had all of them. They're in my diary, all the men.
Did you continue any of those friendships after the war?
No. No.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
The Veterans of Foreign Wars and the Disabled American Veterans.
Now, having served in the Army, how did that change your later thinking about war or about military in general?
War is hell. There's nobody, you don't know whether you're going to win or whether you're going to lose. And it's very treacherous because you get killed at any time, any minute, any hour of the day. I hated the war. But I had to go because it was my duty. The thing is you would either kill or be killed. That was the thing when we were. And I was fortunate for one thing. I was with General Patton's army. He died of something over in Germany. But he says, kill or be killed. That's one way to do it. He ain't a coward. And if you've seen the movie, did you see the movie?
Yes.
When he stopped the guy, he caught holy hell. The guy was like me or anybody else. They were human. He was scared to go back. He sent them back. He said he hoped he killed them. What the hell kind of man is he, general or private? It's not right. I know what it is to suffer. You never know who's going to come up and get you or kill you. I had a hard life.
How would you say your military service affected the rest of your life?
Because of the war, my military duty told me to respect men and women. Try to help them as much as I can. Never ignore them or tell them to go away or something, don't bother. I was always helpful, and I hope I was helpful to the day I die.
I've always known you to be a very religious and faithful man. Did your experience in the war, did it test that faith?
Yes, it did. Every time they shell or come out of something, I bless myself, hoping that the shell didn't hit me. But I always try to treat people nice. I have the greatest respect for people, men, women, and children.
Do you feel that your faith helped you through this experience?
Oh yeah, I had a lot of faith. I still have it. But the thing that I regret in my diary, I wrote the diary, it took some time, that I didn't put the part in about the dead mule saving my life. I should have put that in, I didn't put it in. I didn't think of it at the time. I think I did good by my country.
Are there any other comments you'd like to add, or any other stories you'd like to add to what you've said so far?
No.
Well,
All I can say is war is hell. I hope I never see it again.
Well, Thomas Casey, on behalf of all Americans, I thank you for your service to our country, and thank you for doing this interview.